Today, I'm going to be breaking down some of my favorite cash game plays for the Week 2 NFL Draftkings main slate. And just like I did last week, I'll go position by position, breaking down each one of those plays individually. With that being said, let's dive right into this. And we're going to kick things off here at the quarterback position. Now, I do think there's a lot of appeal here at this position for tournaments this week. Make sure you stay tuned for my final tournament plays video that I post on Saturday morning as well. But in terms of cash games this week, I have my eye on 3 quarterbacks. And the first cash quarterback that I like here this week is Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills, being priced at $7,900 on DraftKings. Good matchup at home here against the Las Vegas Raiders. I think this is going to be a bounce back spot for him after having a poor performance on Monday night against the New York Jets. We essentially need 23.7 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 3x value. Now, for those of you who are new to my videos or haven't seen my videos so far this year, I'm always shooting for 3x in my cash lineup or 150 DraftKings points, so that's the number I'm going with there. And since Josh Allen's rookie season, when the Bills are favored by a touchdown or more as home favorites, he has averaged essentially 24 DraftKings points per game, so numbers are aligning there. And this secondary just isn't very good for the Las Vegas Raiders. I know it's a brand new season here, and we only have 1 week to go off of in 2023, but Vegas did rank 31st in EPA per pass attempt in 2022. No reason to think that Allen can shred this secondary come Sunday. The next cash quarterback that I like here this week is Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Important matchup here at home this week against the Kansas City Chiefs, who will be looking to bounce back after a Week 1 loss at home against the Detroit Lions. There's a lot of shootout potential here in this matchup, and it currently has the highest implied total at 51 points. Lawrence is being priced at $6,700 on DraftKings, so we would need 20.1 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 3x value. Absolutely think he can get there, especially if this matchup does turn into a high-scoring affair. Again, we're going off of some stats here from 2022, but the Chiefs did give up the 7th most passing touchdowns and 3rd most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks just last year. And then the last cash quarterback that I like here this week is Anthony Richardson of the Indianapolis Colts. Look, this guy gave us everything we wanted to in Week 1 against the Jaguars. No reason to think we can't go back to him here in Week 2 against the Houston Texans. And yes, he did get a price bump up on DraftKings to $6,300, so we'll need about 19 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 3x value this week. As long as he's getting 10 plus rushing attempts like he got last week, this guy's going to bring us a safe floor week in and week out. Just last week, Lamar rushed for 38 rushing yards against this Houston defense, and he only had 6 rushing attempts. Again, if Anthony Richardson's going to give us 10 plus, he brings us that safe floor. FTN currently has him projected for 18.5 DraftKings points, just half a point shy of what we need to meet 3x value. And look, I would prefer to get to Josh Allen or Trevor Lawrence this week, but if I need the price savings, I don't mind Richardson at all. Now, moving on to the running back position here, I got 3 running backs that I like in terms of cash game plays, but I do have a few honorable mentions that I'll talk about at the end of this video too, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But my favorite overall running back play here this week is Christian McCaffrey of the 49ers, priced at $8,900 on DraftKings this week, on the road against the Los Angeles Rams. We're going to need about 26.7 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 3x value. I know that's a high number, but if anyone can do it, it's going to be Christian McCaffrey. This guy had 22 rushing attempts in Week 1 and 5 targets, 27 total touches against the Steelers, where he absolutely dominated. Look, if he's going to be getting 25 plus touches per week, I honestly don't care what the matchup is or who they're playing against. This is someone who can dominate week in and week out, especially in this 49ers offense. Christian McCaffrey was made to play with Kyle Shanahan. He's going to have himself a year if he can stay healthy. The Rams had the 3rd lowest stuff rate in Week 1 and allowed the most yards before contact. Christian McCaffrey should be able to expose that. The next running back I got on my list there then is Kenneth Walker of the Seattle Seahawks, and I quite like this matchup between them and the Detroit Lions here this week. There's a lot of high scoring potential in my opinion. In fact, they actually have the 2nd highest implied total on the main slate at 47.5 points, and we're going to need about 17.4 DraftKings points in order for Walker to meet 3x value, being priced at $5,800 on DraftKings. Again, I know this Lions defense improved this offseason. We kind of saw that in week 1 against the Chiefs, but this is a defense that really struggled against running backs last year, ranking 25th overall in rush DVOA and allowing the 6th highest yards per carry. Walker should be able to expose that a little bit. Again, I know this defense has improved, but they didn't improve so significantly that he can't have himself a day. And he also saw a 15.5% target share in week 1 against the Rams. If he's going to continue to get volume like that through the air, I like this play even more. And then the last running back play that I got here before we get to the honorable mentions at the end is Zach Moss of the Indianapolis Colts. And this is primarily a value play here, being that he's priced at $4,700 on DraftKings. We need about 14.1 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 3x value. I think he can do that here in this matchup against the Houston Texans, playing indoors, so I like that as well. Ironically, the last game that Zach Moss did play last season with the Indianapolis Colts was against the Houston Texans, where he actually had himself a nice day. He had 18 rushing attempts for 114 rushing yards, scored a touchdown as well, and ended the game with 3 targets. If he can do that here this week, he's going to smash value. Even if he doesn't do that, I still like this as a value play. Again, going back to last season, the Texans really struggled against running backs, ranking 28th overall in rush DVOA, and they allowed the most fantasy points per game to the running back position. Now, folks, before we dive into the wide receivers here, if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate that. We're trying to get GriffDogg Sports to 4,000 subscribers as soon as possible. The faster we grow this channel and brand here, folks, the more content I'm going to be able to produce for you guys, and the more people I'm going to be able to bring onto this channel as well. So the more you help out, the more I'm going to be able to give back. So like and subscribe. Now let's move on to these wide receivers. And the first wide receiver I got on my cash game list here this week is none other than Amon-Ra St. Brown. If we're searching for volume when it comes to our cash game plays, this guy is a volume monster. If you look at the notes here right now that I got on the screen, this guy has seen 9+ targets in 17 of the last 21 games that he's played while healthy. I know he had a little stint last year where he was a bit banged up, didn't count those games, but 17 of 21, 9+ targets. Suspect he's going to get A+ in this matchup against the Seattle Seahawks, especially if it does turn into a shootout. We need about 23.4 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 3x value, and those Rams wide receivers kind of dominated that Seattle secondary last week. No reason to think that St. Brown can't do the same. Now, speaking of guys who are volume monsters in week 1, Calvin Ridley was awesome for the Jacksonville Jaguars in his debut. Clearly the #1 pass catcher already for Trevor Lawrence. He's priced at $7,200 on DraftKings this week, so we would need 21.6 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 3x value. Again, this game between them and the Chiefs has a lot of high scoring and shootout potential. Highest implied total at 51 points. And again, if we're talking volume here, Ridley was forced the ball in week 1. He had a 35% target share, 49% of the team's air yards, and a 50% end zone share, basically split that with Zay Jones. Now again, I'm going to talk about some honorable mentions here at the end of the video. I absolutely think Zay Jones is in play if you're looking for some value in the 4K range, but if I can get to Ridley, I definitely want to play him. But let's talk a little value here right now. One guy who stuck out to me at his price was Zay Flowers of the Baltimore Ravens. He did get a price bump up from week 1, but rightfully so. He's priced at $5,000 here in week 2, so we'll need 15 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 3x value. But if his week 1 role was any indication of what he's going to look like in this offense going forward, I absolutely think he's a cash game consideration. He saw a 45.5% target share in week 1, which led to him finishing with 9 receptions and almost 80 receiving yards. If he gets that here in week 2, I'll absolutely take that. And I think he can win in the slot here as well this week against these Cincinnati corners, who allowed the 10th most receiving yards per game to slot wide receivers last year, despite facing the 8th fewest slot targets per game. And then dipping into the 4K range here, I like Nico Collins of the Houston Texans. He's priced at $4,800 on DraftKings this week against the Indianapolis Colts, so we would need 14.4 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 3x value. It's a guy who saw a lot of volume in week 1, albeit part of it was some garbage time losing to the Baltimore Ravens, but he saw 25% target share, 64.2% of the team's air yards. That's not something that's going to be sustainable going forward, but worth mentioning. And the stat I like the most is he saw a first read target share of 33.3%. That is something I can definitely get on board with. Plus, he's got a good matchup here this week against the cornerback Dallas Flowers for the Indianapolis Colts, who has given up 122 passer rating over the course of his career. Now let's talk a couple of tight ends here, and honestly everyone, I plan on just punting at the tight end position this week when it comes to my cash lineup. There were really 4 different tight ends that stuck out to me. I'm going to talk about Zach Ertz and Luke Musgrave here, but honestly if you went with Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys, or even one of the 2 tight ends for the Buffalo Bills, whether it be Dalton Kincaid or Dawson Knox, I don't have a problem with that either. Again, essentially punting in the low 3K range when it comes to my tight end in my cash lineup this week. But I don't mind Zach Ertz here at $3,500. Yes, he's old. Yes, this Arizona team doesn't have a lot to love about it. But at $3,500, we need 10.5 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 3x value. For a guy who saw 10 targets in week 1, I can get on board with that, or a 33.3% target share. And plus, this Giants secondary hasn't been great at stopping tight ends over the last couple of seasons. They allowed the 9th most receiving yards and 11th most fantasy points per game to tight ends in 2022. And then the other tight end that I want to highlight here is Luke Musgrave of the Green Bay Packers. I did like his role in week 1, but it's worth noting that Christian Watson did practice here on Friday and is questionable to return here on Sunday for week 2. If he plays, I will bump Musgrave down a notch, but at $3,200, again, I'm essentially punting the position. We would need 9.6 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 3x value. And again, I like the role that Musgrave had in week 1 for this Packers offense, playing 75% of the offensive snaps and ran a route on 80% of Jordan Love's dropbacks. He only saw 4 targets in week 1, but he's a rookie tight end. That's a number that could increase. But again, if Christian Watson plays here on Sunday, I'm less interested in Musgrave overall. Probably would pivot to Zach Ertz or even Jake Ferguson at that time, or again, pick one of those 2 tight ends for the Buffalo Bills, who should dominate that game on Sunday against the Raiders. And then the last positional play here with the defenses. We'll keep this short and sweet. Most of you know I typically just spend down for defense when it comes to my cash lineup, unless I for some reason have money laying over, then I'll spend up at the position. But 2 defenses I liked in the 6K range here this week were the Arizona Cardinals and the Tennessee Titans. Essentially just punting with these 2. The Cardinals were actually surprisingly pretty good as a defense last week, albeit it was against the Washington Commanders. They forced 3 turnovers in that game and had 6 sacks and also scored a defensive touchdown. If they can force 3 turnovers and get 6 sacks this week against the Giants, I'd absolutely take that at this price here at $2,600. Essentially need 7.8 DraftKings points in order for them to meet 3x value. And I know the Cowboys defense is one of the best in the NFL, but that defense forced 3 turnovers last week against the Giants and had 7 sacks themselves. And then if I really need the price savings, I'll go down to the Titans. I kind of like the Chargers from a tournament perspective this week, but Mike Vrabel can also get his team going when playing at home, especially that defense. So at $2,400, need 7.2 DraftKings points in order to meet 3x value. But again, if I'm punting at the position, I'm really not going to worry about it. I'm spending up elsewhere. And as I mentioned throughout today's video, I do have a handful of honorable mentions that I want to talk about here at the end. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly here, but these are guys I think we can consider in our cash lineup this week, or at the very least should be keeping an eye on heading into Sunday. First is A.J. Dillon of the Green Bay Packers. If Aaron Jones does not play here this week and he didn't practice on Friday, Dillon definitely needs to be in the conversation for cash. Next, I have Rachaad White of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Really like the matchup here this week against the Chicago Bears, and really like the volume he got last week against Minnesota. He just wasn't super efficient with that, so I did bump him down just a little bit. Next is Joshua Kelly of the Los Angeles Chargers. Similar situation here to A.J. Dillon. If Austin Eckler does not play this week, I think he has to be talked about at his price tag of $5,000. And then 2 wide receivers here I want to mention in the 4K range. First being Puka Nacua. We obviously all saw him get 15 targets in week 1 against Seattle, and while I don't think he'll have himself quite an efficient game against the 49ers, The volume is hard to ignore. He is also banged up a little bit here, limited at practice, so keep an eye on that. And the last being Zay Jones, who I mentioned earlier when talking about Calvin Ridley. If you're looking for price savings in that game, I like him at $4,700, and I like the volume he got last week against the Colts. Alright everyone, that is going to wrap up this video here for today. As always, thank y'all for taking the time out of your day to watch the content here on this channel. If you could like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate that. Let's have ourselves a great weekend here, everyone. Let's win some money on this Week 2 main slate. In the meantime, I'm out of here.